I'm just laughing my ass off and need to share this with someone. I've put up a group to play a homebrewed Dungeons & Dragons campaign I've been planning for a while. These are all people found online through Reddit or Roll20. I asked them to come up with some character concepts and bring them to a session 0 for discussion. During the session, one of the players, someone playing a dwarf, got annoyed that someone else brought an elf as a character concept. They complained that it didn't fit the lore. When I asked what they meant by that, he blurted, "Dwarves and elves hate each other. We can't be in a party?" I laughed more than I should. This is a world I created, and in no way am I bringing that BS into my table. I laughed, and the other players laughed. I kicked the guy, and we started a campaign next Tuesday. The first ever fantasy thing that I really, truly loved, like many others, was Lord of the Rings. A universe where dwarves and elves absolutely do not like each other, and yet Legolas and Gimli may be one of the most quintessential friendships in all of fantasy. But I guess this guy sees that and decides it's an opportunity to scream at others about their character concepts. Great. Just great. A while ago, I DM'd a D&D 5th edition one-shot for beginners at a small local convention. I had a table and a time slot set and advertised it was beginners only, for me to train my DMing skills. At starting time, I was greeted by 5 eager players. I asked which of them had previous RPG experience as an opening question. 2 of the players had played 1 or 2 sessions of D&D or some other system before, but then a greasy smug neckbeard raised his hand.
Yep, I've been playing for a few years now.
Myself pointing over to the next table. Okay, this is a beginner's table. The advanced player's table is right over there.
I wasn't allowed at the advanced table, and I can help the others with character creation.
Having another more experienced player to help the noobs create characters will take the burden off of my shoulders, I thought. Though in hindsight, him not being welcome at the advanced table was a red flag. As we say over here, using hindsight, he'll only be looking down a cow's ass. I like that quote a lot. The neckbeard took the complete D&D virgins under his wing, a quiet weeby girl and her goofy hipster himbo boyfriend. I did a quick overview of the system, covering the basics like stats, races, classes, backgrounds, skills, and told the players to use the quick character creation options and standard array. Player's handbook only. I also told the players that we'd be playing in a nondescript, like late medieval European setting, all of them starting off in their home village, for party cohesion's sake. During character creation, I heard the neckbeard saying to the weeb girl,
"No, you can't play a catgirl ninja. Tabaxis aren't in the player's handbook."
Myself interrupting the neckbeard. Well, you can take the halfling stat block and reflavor it to be a Nico-chin, as it were. As for class, if you want to be a ninja-like thing, you can either take rogue, which is a medieval burglar or assassin, or a monk, which is basically a Shaolin monk using magical kung fu. The weeb girl's eyes lit up at hearing magical kung fu, but dimmed as the neckbeard interrupted.
"I'm already playing a rogue, and kung fu monks aren't historically accurate. Also, there aren't any Japanese people in medieval Europe."
Well, the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller were militant monastic orders, so fighting monks were common back then. Also, this is a fantasy setting. I don't care what you play, just reflavor the halfling stat block, and we'll be done with it. The neckbeard shrugged in an irritated fashion, but continued character creation with the pair. The himbo was more in it for his girlfriend and didn't take the game too seriously. His character pitch: a barbarian warrior princess like Xena, or Red Sonja, with a big axe and dressed in a skimpy chainmail bikini. Neckbeard to the himbo:
"You can't play a female barbarian. We're playing in a medieval setting, so your barbarian would have to be a Viking, and Vikings are all men."
Okay, at this point, I'm losing my patience with the neckbeard. Dude, again, this is a fantasy setting loosely based on late medieval Europe. If we'd be literally playing in that period, the Scandinavian peoples would have been all converted to Christianity, and there'd be no Vikings at all.
"Oh yeah? Well, how the hell do you know?"
A little background on myself. I've been a medieval reenactor for over 10 years at that point. The reenactment scene is rife with know-it-alls, and having to debate the authenticity of your historical portrayal at the drop of the hat is something that kinda comes with the hobby. I play fantasy TTRPGs to get out of the constant, non-ironic use of, "well, actually," and having to show my historical evidence to smug ye old Braden Thine Neckles all the time. So like the weary, cynical mercenary I portray, I sighed, donned my war gear, and went into battle. Me, to the neckbeard. So you like being historically accurate?
"Yeah, well."
Describe your character.
"What?"
Describe what your character looks like.
Well, I'm playing a female half-elf rogue with the urchin background. She's wearing a dark black studded leather armor, a black cloak with a hood to hide her long black hair, and she's got a rapier belted to her waist.
Okay, so first of all, studded leather armor never existed. That's a misinterpretation by the original D&D creators of what they call the coat of plates found at the Battle of Visby in 1361 Sweden. The most prevalent armor worn by commoners would have been a gambizon, a thick, pleated coat equivalent to padded armor. It's either that, or you'd have to go straight up to chainmail.
But padded armor is such a low AC bonus, and chainmail would ruin my stealth rolls.
Cutting him off again. Secondly, black clothing was affordable only for the wealthy nobility. The cloth would require many repeated baths of a rare blue wood dye to color wool black, each bath upping the wool's price per foot by a lot. Also, the city guard would arrest a commoner wearing the wrong colors on suspicion of thefts, flog a confession out of you, and either fine you or cut off an ear as a permanent reminder. Being generous, a street urchin like yourself would have money to buy clothes that were dyed at most like once, so you'd be wearing dirty off-whites and pastel colors at best. Thirdly, rapiers are from the Renaissance, so those aren't allowed in a strictly medieval setting. You'd probably have a short, single-edged messer. You'd also have to leave any blade longer than a hand's length at the local armory, otherwise you'd be arrested, flogged, and fined or branded by the city guard. Oh, and late medieval commoner women all had their hair cropped short and wore white linen headdresses against spreading lice, so you'd want to adjust that or be mistaken for a lady of negotiable virtue, if you catch my drift.
But this is fantasy.
Okay, so first you're arguing for historical accuracy, and now you're arguing that's just fantasy. Well, it's a good thing you have a double standard. Keeps your bike from falling over.
But you're ruining my fun.
And you're ruining ours? Then the neckbeard got all his stuff together and left in a huff. There was this awkward silence at the table for a moment as one of the other players asked, "Are you gonna hold us to those historical standards?" No, this is a fantasy game. I ended up explaining my reenactment background, showing pictures, and explaining the difference between reenactment and LARP, and we didn't get to play D&D much afterwards. Oh well, you win some, you lose some. Reenactment sounds fun. I've never done it, but I do have a fun story about the one reenactment person that I've met. When I was back in high school, I had a philosophy class, and our teacher was gone for a day, and of course we had a substitute. And for that day, we were just supposed to do like some philosophy worksheets or some, I don't remember. Point is, the substitute was a reenactment enthusiast, and throughout the entirety of the class, he was awkwardly getting students to like wear some uniforms he bought and play around with some of his props. And the students were okay with it because people weren't really bothered to do philosophy papers, and it was a way to, you know, get out of doing that. But yeah, I have no idea what that guy thought he was doing with this class. He was just supposed to sit there and watch a bunch of kids do philosophy homework, but I'll never find out what his motives were because I never saw him again. Okay, anyway, look, back to the actual story. So yeah, historical accuracy is something that you can use as a reference. D&D is referential to history, but at the end of the day, it is fantasy. Be as historical as you think is going to be fun. Fun is the point of D&D, and if you're just using historical accuracy to lecture the rest of the group on why their character concepts are stupid, well, that's lame. I guess compared to the other stories here, this one is not so bad. This could have either been a story where the horror just creeps in and plants its roots like a parasite and grows little by little, or just a rant. Either way, it culminated recently, and I'm still mad about it. I don't pretend that I've always been a good DM, or that my campaigns are perfect. I did some crap and made some bad arcs, starting with the choice of players. Some of them were just not interested enough, and others were just... well, they were just bad. We started as 5 players, in the end 3 left and 2 joined, one of them only recently, but for a long time period there were only 3 players. 2 of them have remained from the beginning, while one has basically carried the whole campaign. The other one is the one that disappointed me the most. We'll just call him the Sorcerer. This was his first D&D game ever, and I understand that role-playing is hard, and it can take a while to get used to it. But the Sorcerer never really interacted with anything, barely spoke unless he was talked to. Basically, all the talking and the important decisions were left to the Bard, and I thought that the fighter joining the game would change things, but I quickly realized that the fighter was not different from the Sorcerer, only a little bit more quirky, and interested in his background only. This started to take a toll on Bard, and we had a good talk about it. Everyone understood the difficulties they were putting the player through, and promised to get better. Every time at the end of the arc, I asked for advice on what I could do to improve, asked what they did and didn't like. The sorcerer was enthusiastic about the story, saying he was taking notes and giving his input for the future, things like that, and he was having fun. And I believed him because at the end of the day, the important thing is everyone's having fun, right? This brings us to our last arc. Fortunately, another player joined, Mage, and everything felt like fresh air. He engaged with the world, roleplayed a lot, and generally was being a supportive player. Sorcerer, on the other hand, seemed to get worse, because the two other players were now talking. He didn't feel like he needed to say anything at all, but this arc was all around about the Sorcerer's backstory, so it just must have caught his interest. It took place on the island where his father was born. His player character is a scholar, heavily tied to dragons, as he has one that lives inside him, and after fights and difficulties, they arrive at the end, where they find what's basically a fountain of knowledge, guarded by a dragon, that everyone thought was extinct. They found out that God was dead, and discovered that Sorcerer's father is considered a traitor. And Sorcerer's reaction is nothing. He did not want anything to do with the Fountain of Knowledge. He didn't ask questions about his family, about dragons, nothing. He basically T-posed with the fighter the entire time, while the other two had the time of their lives. I was completely defeated. If this didn't catch the attention of Sorcerer, what could? 2.5 years of campaign with a story that I enjoyed creating, and all I was meeting with was a brick wall of nothingness and a blank face. After the session, I talked to the players, and with Sorcerer, I was met with excuse on excuse, often in contrast with each other, which at the end can be summed up with a, I like your campaign, but I'm not willing to put an effort to give an actual personality to my character. The fighter, at least, was willing to do better, so I'm not mad at him, but the Sorcerer, after all this time, there's no justification. I just feel drained, tired, disrespected, and kind of lied to. I enjoy writing stories, but at this point, it's not fun anymore when people don't engage with you. I'm now taking a break from DMing, and I think finally giving the boot to the Sorcerer, since we've already had this discussion and nothing changed. I don't like the idea since this is my friend, but at this point, this is for my sanity. Sorry, I guess this was mostly a rant. In the end, I'm just tired. This is certainly not as bad as a lot of other stuff that we see on this subreddit. The Sorcerer is not engaging with the game. And yeah, D&D games really do require engagement in order for them to work. You can't just be playing D&D just to hang out with your friends. You need to want to play D&D. You need to engage in the game. Otherwise, yeah, it can absolutely fall apart, and the fun can be ruined for not just yourself, but for the rest of the table as well. And that, I think, is what we're seeing here. I completely understand the frustration here. In fact, the exact same thing happened to me. I can't say that I was upset at the player. I understood that she wasn't interested in a super roleplay heavy dramatic plotline, but I gave it to her anyway, and that was completely on me, honestly. And so I swapped it, changed it around to something a bit more simple, something that she could engage with easier. Maybe that's what this DM needs to do, or maybe this DM just wants very heavy plots in their game, and the Sorcerer just simply isn't compatible with the style. That's just gonna happen sometimes. At the same time, though, I don't really see the problem with the Sorcerer just tagging along as a character. Like, I understand that it can be frustrating to build up a plot and then have it not work out, but at the same time, talk to the Sorcerer about the plot. Like, ask them if they're interested in doing a personalized plot line, because I don't know if I'm forgetting something because I'm recording this analysis the day after, but I don't remember the DM ever saying that they, like, asked, and that's kind of a big deal. Hey, this is my first time posting here, but recently this story popped into my mind as I was developing a new character. My at-the-time boyfriend, a dungeon master, convinced me to try out Arborea and help me create my first character. I wanted to go for a seems like a damsel in distress but is more dangerous than she appears character concept. I was hoping I could use some underestimation as an advantage, and it could make for a nice flaw. I thought of it like in the movies, that women are seen as helpless, that the first impression is not to see her as a threat, but once she's actually doing something impressive, kicking some butts and such, people would recognize her abilities, that the nice innocent girl was her cover, a way to use the natural weapon nature had gifted her with her appearance, but that she was actually cold-blooded. He, the DM, was on board immediately. I played a thief as my class, Robin Hood style. So my boyfriend, as DM, had planned a few one-on-one sessions so I could get familiar with the game before joining the group. In my second one of these, I was searching for information about some underground movement. I needed to break into a house to question someone who was from the town's authorities, knowing that he was involved on some level. Breaking in went pretty smoothly, but the problems began to start with the questioning part. I managed to catch him alone without the possibility to get any help from his guards locking us together in a room. I was trying to persuade him into giving me information. I thought I didn't do such a terrible job, but the DM told me, "You're so sweet when you try to be intimidating." Being told this is actually one of my pet peeves. DM knew that I had given him an earful about it every time he used that sentence in a fight. I was prepared to hear such a thing in-game when people hadn't experienced her skills yet, but to hear it out of game about my roleplay was not fun, especially as I was already nervous about it, which he also already knew. In-game, the man just made snarky remarks when he saw me. Okay, I suspected this would happen in-game, but this wouldn't stop even after I was able to disarm him and tie him up. He was still not taking anything seriously, although now he had lost a fight against the little girl. The DM laughing his butt off and reiterating how cute I was trying to be dangerous. Kind of annoyed, I tried to persuade him again. Charisma was actually one of my character's strong suits. It didn't help although the guy had a knife to his throat. I got more furious by the minute. I tried basically everything that came to my mind to the point where I was just torturing the guy, and he acted like I was engaging in a normal conversation with him, still making snarky comments and jokes, not even being in pain or anything. This was going on over half an hour without any progress made. Out of character, I decided to just tell the DM that he had his fun, but could he please just take me more seriously and treat me with some kind of respect? Also reiterating that she was supposed to be respected once you actually saw her skills and not just her appearance. Didn't help that at all. Also, he wouldn't give me any tips on how to get anywhere with this situation. So in-game, there was no way to actually get some info out of the guy, and the conversation out of the game led to nothing. So I decided I would just kill him off and search his office for any kind of other person that also had the information. So I did exactly that. At that point, the DM got serious, so I thought, great, he had enough of his fun, so we could finally proceed. But after I indeed killed the man, he ended the session pretty quickly after. By the way, I purposefully chose a long death in hopes that he would tell me something while he could still be rescued. But nope, still no change in behavior. I wondered what was wrong, so I asked the DM, and he was furious that I actually killed the guy. He said he had to rewrite the entire thing because I ruined the plot twist. It was supposed to be that this wasn't just a middleman, but the big bad guy all along. I was mad that somehow this was now my fault after he had not taken me seriously in-game and also out of game. So what choice did I really have left? I did not get what exactly he was expecting me to do, and he wouldn't speak to me and was just sulking afterwards. I tried asking him directly after that too. If the guy was supposed to be the big baddie, was there no way to solve this in-game? Like giving false information, then sending your minions to kill her off or something like that? I was wondering if I could try this character concept again with my new group, and they're awesome, but I'm unsure if the whole debacle was created by the concept in the first place. I thought if it wasn't good to play, the DM would tell me? TLDR, DM won't take my character nor me seriously and then gets furious that I accidentally dismantled his plot idea as the consequence. Hey, my fellow DMs out there, when you are preparing a big bad guy reveal, I don't recommend the reveal being, this easily killed minion is actually the big bad all along, because you know, your party might easily kill them, hence what happened here. I mean, seriously, the OP is right. Could the DM think of no other way to solve this situation and to resolve it without the death of the BBEG? I mean, the OP was giving him so many damn chances. Also, for a first-time player, she seems to be doing everything right to make this specific character concept work. It's a cool concept, and she was doing the stuff to make it work, and the DM was essentially just stonewalling her, while also having an extra dose of condescension in there. Getting condescended by your DM is annoying as is, but this DM is also her boyfriend! Yay! Extra dose of complete irritants. But hey, this story had a happy ending, and good luck to OP with her future D&D endeavors. A couple of years ago, after moving to a new city, I decided to start looking for a D&D game to get into. I scanned the Facebook groups of a local game store with game nights and found a post from a DM looking for a few players for a homebrew one-shot with potential to expand into a campaign. I reached out, and everything seemed to be on the up and up. We'd be playing 5th edition, and expectations were to show up with a 3rd level character ready to go. Not really knowing who or what I would be playing with or who the party composition would be, I went ahead and decided to create 2 characters, a monk and a sorcerer. I showed up on the day, excited to meet with some new people and get into the game. When I get to the table, I see the DM has a bunch of hobby boxes next to him, chock full of various game pieces, and that got me even more excited. So I introduced myself to the players, 4 including myself and the DM. We chew the fat for a bit and everyone seems to be getting along fine. The DM turns out to be ex-military, currently living on disability, which is where he gets the time to build all these set pieces. He and one of the other players, who was also currently military, chum it up for a bit before we start asking each other about characters. The rest of the party was composed of a paladin, a cleric, and a ranger. Having not played monk in a while, I let everyone know I had 2 characters ready to go, but if it was okay with the rest of the group if I was leaning towards monk. Nobody objected, so the DM took a look over our character sheets and then gave a brief description of the game/expectations. I think the minute Grimdark left his mouth I should have sensed what I was getting into, but we'll come back to that. Anyway, the session starts with the party stuck in a cage in some underground lair. We escape from the cage and eventually make our way to a room with 3 tombs. He describes the tombs as having large statues of regal-looking dwarves, and also mentions a plaque on the wall. Here's where the cracks start to show. The DM asks who in the party speaks Dwarvish. None of the characters spoke Dwarvish, and the DM starts getting visibly frustrated and says, "I have never played in a game where nobody speaks Dwarvish. I don't know how you're going to solve the puzzle without being able to read the plaque." He had designed a puzzle gating our progress with the only clue locked behind a language none of us had. We putzed around trying everything we could think of for 30 minutes before he deeply sighed and finally asked one of us to roll an intelligence check, which finally unlocked the message on the plaque. Once we had the clue, the solution took about 15 seconds to figure out. We each just kneeled in front of a statue, and the way opened. Okay, bit of a waste of time, but at least we're past it. In the next room, he describes what is very clearly a deactivated portal. Again, we start combing the room for clues while I look over the portal structure. DM chimes in, "Who is proficient in Arcana?" Again, nobody. DM huffs, looks over at me and says, "I wish you'd gone with Sorcerer." I say, sorry, I didn't know it would be a problem. I don't mind switching." He responds, "It's too late to change. Fine, the portal mysteriously opens." It was at this point I'm beginning to sense some hostility in my direction from the Dungeon Master. Not sure where it's coming from, but seeing as I was the only one who showed up with multiple characters to choose from, I guess in his mind I'd made the wrong choice, thus ruining his game. Anyway, we press on, with 3 of us through the portal. The DM then says, "Nobody's going back to check the room before you leave?" The last remaining guy, who happens to be the DM's new military buddy, looks around the room and finds a whole bunch of goodies sitting on a damn display pedestal. Bear in mind, we had just spent 10 minutes searching that very room for a way to activate the portal. At no point was it hinted that there would be anything in there. The portal takes the party to a town that is overrun with a fleshy substance. As we make our way through the substance and into a tavern, we find a young woman asleep in a chair. She wakes up and pleads with us to help save her family, who are under the same sleeping spell. We foolishly follow her into the basement, where the fleshy substance we've been moving through rises up to block our exit. The woman melts into the goo, and we see that the source of the goo is a gibbering mouther. Aw, come on, not an Oblex? Really? We need more Oblex fights. I love those things. Anyway, the rogue and the cleric immediately start to run up the stairs and try to break open the door while the paladin and I hold off the creature that is not an Oblex. Here's where everything falls completely off the rails. I move in to attack with my staff and try to follow up with a flurry of blows. When the DM asks, "Do you drop your staff?" No, why would I drop my staff? You have to drop your staff to do an unarmed strike. What do you mean? It's a feature of my class that I spend a key point to take 2 unarmed strikes after an attack. Yeah, but how can you hit when you're holding a staff? Unarmed strike can be anything. I could headbutt, or kick, or fart on him for all that matters. No, you have to drop your staff. Fine, I drop my staff and I just kick him twice. So I go to kick with my first unarmed strike. The roll misses and the DM says, "You kick out and the creature wraps its mouth around your leg. You feel a wrenching, terrible pain as the mouth bites off your leg." No roll for damage, no roll for attack, nothing. Just dismemberment as a reaction. Okay, that's cool. He then proceeds to go into extreme detail about how my character is going into shock and the gore and the viscera of the missing leg. Guess that's what he meant by Grimdark. Meanwhile, the other military guy is saying,
Yep, that's how it would happen.
The two of them start living out their own little gorgy while me and the other party members kind of just sit there awkwardly. The cleric's turn comes up and they heal me. The DM lets me know that my leg is still gone. I'm no longer bleeding out, but now I move at half speed. So in turn, he's taken a character class that is designed to move quickly and strike multiple times and removed both of those abilities. At this point, I'm having zero fun and can clearly see the writing on the wall. On my next turn, I sacrificed my character by jumping at the monster, not before arguing whether I could jump with one leg, to buy the party time to escape. Then I got up, said my goodbyes, and walked out of the worst D&D game of my life. That is how you should handle the worst D&D game of your life. Walking away is definitely a good thing in situations like this. Now, besides the fact that the DM is completely misunderstanding how unarmed strike works at a basic level, the DM is also a complete dick, antagonistic, and shows favoritism. These are three factors that are not great. The DM's puzzles are asinine, relying on talents that the characters need to, predict at character creation, which, yeah, characters aren't doing because, surprise, surprise, D&D players aren't clairvoyant. On top of that, look, dismemberment and permanent injuries, that's part of some D&D games and that's great. But just ripping off someone's leg as a reaction with no attack roll or damage or anything, kinda lame. Cap it all off with favoritism for his new buddy, and you just have a game that is a recipe for disaster. I'm glad OP walked out, because this had some seriously bad writing on the wall. Alright, and that is where we're going to end today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do check out our Tabletop Tavern Tip series, where we give advice for both DMs and players old and new. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment condescension to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.